She mocked the man riding a bicycle to work. Then his signature was on her company's biggest check. The pen, a Mont Blanc Meisterstück Legrand, crafted from deep black precious resin with gold-plated fittings, felt unnervingly light in his hand. It was a $785 instrument designed for moments just like this one, yet it felt less substantial than the worn handlebars of his bicycle. Across the vast mahogany table, Lorraine Pierce adjusted the collar of her silk Chanel blouse. Her smile was a masterpiece of cosmetic dentistry and corporate ambition aimed at the man she believed was in charge, the CEO of the acquiring firm. She did not look at the man holding the pen. Why would she? He was just the signatory, the final cog in the machine. Whenever you're ready, Mr. Adebayo, the lawyer said, his voice smooth as polished granite. Seun Adebayo looked up. His eyes, the color of rich Nigerian earth after a long rain, did not land on the lawyer or the expectant CEO or the documents that represented a $4.2 billion transfer of power. They landed on Lorraine. He saw the flicker of confusion in her eyes, a vague, dismissive familiarity, like trying to place a waiter from a restaurant she'd visited months ago. Her brow furrowed, the perfectly sculpted arch of her eyebrow dipped by a millimeter. Then recognition detonated behind her eyes. Not a gentle dawn, but a violent explosion of lightning. Her face, a carefully constructed mask of confidence, shattered. The blood drained from it, leaving a sickly, pale canvas beneath the expensive foundation. Her mouth fell open. The sound that escaped was not a word, but a short, sharp gasp of air, the sound of a diver realizing their oxygen has run out 100 feet below the surface. The man in the custom-tailored Tom Ford suit, the man with the Patek Philippe watch peeking from his cuff, the man holding the pen that would decide her entire future. He was the man on the bicycle, the man she had called trash. For all the latest stories that remind you of the power of kindness and the certainty of justice, be sure to like and subscribe to our channel. You won't want to miss what happens next. Now let me take you back to where it all began. Seun Adebayo was a ghost who walked in daylight. At 51 years old, his net worth was a staggering $5.3 billion, a fortune built with the razor-sharp mind of a Lagos street trader and the patient, relentless force of the Ogun River. He owned silent equity in a dozen tech firms, controlling interest in 3 West African shipping conglomerates, and vast real estate holdings in Atlanta, London, and Dubai. His name appeared on SEC filings and shareholder reports, but never in gossip columns or on the glossy pages of magazines. He moved through the world unseen, his wealth a silent, invisible ocean beneath the surface of his simple life. He lived not in a sprawling Buckhead mansion, but in a modest, tastefully decorated brownstone in Decatur. He drove no fleet of luxury cars. His chosen mode of transport was a Schwinn signature, a simple, sturdy bicycle with a well-oiled chain and a small basket on the front. He wore no designer brands. Today, he was dressed in a pair of faded Levi's jeans, a plain gray t-shirt from Target, and a pair of worn-in New Balance sneakers. Item by item, he was a portrait of unremarkable middle-class life. This was his armor. This was his disguise. This anonymity was not an affectation. It was a necessity. Wealth had brought him everything but the one thing he craved, connection. It had built walls of glass and steel around him, populated by people who saw not a man, but a number, a walking, talking bank vault. They smiled at his jokes, agreed with his opinions, and offered a friendship that was merely a long-term investment strategy. The loneliness of it was a physical ache, a constant low-grade fever in his soul. He had grown up in Onitsha, in a home filled with the scent of his mother's cooking and the sound of her wisdom. Mama Adebayo was a woman whose hands were rough from the market, but whose spirit was as soft as fresh-pounded fufu. She had raised him on Proverbs and pepper soup, teaching him that a man's worth was not in his wallet, but in his character. Seun, my son, she would tell him, her voice a gentle melody, remember this always. The river does not boast, yet it shapes the stone. She taught him that true power was quiet, patient, and persistent. It did not shout its own name. It simply was. After she passed, the world felt colder, the silence in his large, empty homes more profound. Her voice was the compass he still followed. So he rode his bicycle through the streets of Atlanta, searching for a single, authentic human interaction, a moment that wasn't transactional. He was a billionaire panning for the goal of simple kindness. His daily route took him down Peachtree Road, past the gleaming skyscrapers of Midtown. One building in particular, the 40-story monolith of glass and chrome that housed the regional headquarters of Sterling Cole Financial, was a regular landmark on his evening ride home. And it was there, standing by the revolving doors every evening, that he first saw Papa Kweku. Papa Kweku was 69 years old, a man carved from Ghanaian mahogany and quiet dignity. His skin was the color of midnight silk, and his hair was a close-cropped crown of silver. He was the night watchman, a man paid to be invisible, to blend into the background of corporate power. But Papa Kweku did not blend. He radiated a warmth that the building's powerful fluorescent lights could not replicate. It was in his eyes, which held the gentle wisdom of a man who had seen much of life and decided to love it anyway. His hands, though wrinkled and marked by time, were steady. They were working hands, hands that had built, repaired, and held. For weeks, Seun rode past, and every time, Papa Kweku would offer a small, respectful nod. It was a simple gesture, but it was consistent. It was offered to the man on the bicycle, a man who could do nothing for him. With the same quiet grace he likely offered the executives in their chauffeured cars. One evening, as Seun slowed to a stop to adjust his basket, Papa Kweku spoke for the first time. His voice was a low, pleasant rumble, like distant, gentle thunder. The evening air is sweet today, my brother. It was not a question. It was not a demand. It was a simple, shared observation, an invitation into a shared moment. Seun, a man who negotiated nine-figure deals, who could command the attention of entire boardrooms with a single word, felt a knot in his throat. Yes, Seun managed to reply, his voice a little hoarse. Yes, it is. A good ride makes the heart strong, Papa Kweku said, his smile revealing lines of kindness etched around his eyes. Be safe on your journey home. Those were the words, the kind invitation. Be safe on your journey home. It was a blessing, offered freely and without condition. In that moment, Papa Kweku saw a man, not a status. He saw a fellow traveler at the end of a long day. For Seun, it felt like the first drop of rain after a decade of drought. This became their ritual. A few words exchanged every evening. They spoke of the weather, of the traffic, of the changing seasons. Seun learned that Papa Kweku was from Accra, that he had a daughter in college at Georgia State, and that his wife's jollof rice was without question the best in the entire state of Georgia. Papa Kweku learned only that Seun's name was Seun, and that he enjoyed riding his bicycle. It was all he needed to know. Their small 5-minute conversations became the anchor of Seun's day, a tiny island of authenticity in his vast ocean of wealth. But they were being watched. From her corner office on the 35th floor, Lorraine Pierce saw the world not as a collection of people, but as a ladder. Every person was either a rung to be stepped on or an obstacle to be kicked aside. Her beauty was a weapon, purchased and maintained with the precision of a military campaign. Her hair was a flawless cascade of Brazilian weave, costing upwards of $3,000. Her suit was a razor-sharp Alexander McQueen blazer, $2,500, and matching trousers, $1,100. Her shoes were Christian Louboutin pumps, $800, that made a sharp, commanding click on the marble floors. Her worth was declared by the brands. She wore a walking, talking billboard for her own ambition. She had clawed her way up to regional director at Sterling Cole, and she guarded her position with a feral intensity. She saw weakness everywhere, and she despised it. To her, status was oxygen. Appearance was everything. One afternoon, standing in the lobby with her assistant, she saw Papa Kweku through the thick glass doors, laughing with the man on the bicycle. A look of profound disgust twisted her perfectly glossed lips. Who is that person? The old man is always talking to, she asked, her voice dripping with condescension. Her assistant, a nervous young woman named Chloe, glanced outside. I don't know, Ms. Pierce, just some guy on a bike. He looks like he crawled out of a ditch, Lorraine sneered, her eyes scanning Seun's simple clothes with theatrical disdain. It's a bad look for the company. We have clients coming in and out of this building, billies and dollar clients. The first thing they see shouldn't be our security guard fraternizing with the local homeless population. It cheapens the brand. The cruelty was casual, reflexive. It was the way she spoke about anyone she deemed beneath her. Chloe murmured a quiet agreement, terrified of saying the wrong thing. Lorraine watched for another moment, her eyes narrowed. She saw Papa Kweku smile, a wide, genuine expression of warmth. The sight of it, directed at someone so insignificant, seemed to offend her on a fundamental level. She turned, the sharp click of her heels echoing her displeasure as she swept toward the elevators, leaving a trail of expensive perfume and cold contempt in her wake. The first stone had been cast. The river, however, flowed on, unaware. The first real encounter happened on a Tuesday. It was raining, a miserable, gray Atlanta drizzle that soaked through everything. Seun, clad in a thin waterproof jacket, had pulled up under the building's large marble awning to wait out the worst of the downpour. Papa Kweku, seeing him shivering, had stepped just outside the revolving doors, a breach of his strict protocol. Ah, the sky weeps today, my brother Seun, he said, his voice full of sympathy. You will catch a cold if you stay in this dampness. I'll be all right, Papa Kweku. Seun smiled, genuinely touched. Just waiting for a small break in the clouds. At least stand closer to the door. The heat from the lobby will give you some warmth. It was at that exact moment that the elevator doors slid open with a soft chime. Lorraine Pierce emerged, flanked by two junior executives she was clearly trying to impress. She was in the middle of a sentence, her voice loud and performative. When her eyes landed on the scene by the door, she stopped dead. Her face, which had been arranged in a mask of charming authority, hardened into a sheet of ice. The two executives stopped with her, confused. She ignored Seun completely, as one might ignore a piece of litter on the sidewalk. Her focus was entirely on Papa Kweku. Mr. Kweku, she said, her voice dangerously low and sharp, what precisely do you think you are doing? Papa Kweku turned, his warm smile faltering slightly. He gave a respectful nod. Good evening, Madam Pierce. This gentleman was just sheltering from the rain. Lorraine took two slow, deliberate steps forward, her Louboutin heels clicking like gunshots in the quiet lobby. Your post is inside the building. Your job is to monitor the security cameras and greet clients. It is not to loiter by the entrance making small talk with vagrants. The word hung in the air, ugly and sharp. The two junior executives shifted uncomfortably. Seun felt a hot flush of anger rise in his chest, but he remained silent, his face a neutral mask. He wanted to see. He needed to see. Papa Kweku's dignity was a shield. He did not flinch. His voice remained even, respectful. Yes, madam, I apologize. I was only concerned he would become ill. His health is not your concern, Lorraine snapped, her voice rising now, enjoying the audience. This building is your concern, its image, its security, and you are failing at both by allowing this riffraff to loiter under our awning. It looks unprofessional. It looks unsafe. She finally deigned to flick her eyes over Seun, a brief sweeping glance of utter dismissal. Get him out of here, now. Without waiting for a reply, she turned on her heel and swept away, the two executives scurrying after her like nervous pilot fish. Silence descended. The only sound was the drumming of the rain on the marble plaza. Papa Kweku turned back to Seun. The shame and humiliation were there in his eyes, but they were buried deep beneath layers of resilience and grace. He looked pained, not for himself, but for the insult delivered to his friend. I am very sorry, my brother, he said, his voice set a low whisper. You have nothing to be sorry for, Seun said, his own voice tight with the rage he hadn't felt in years. She is the one who should be sorry. It is her building, Papa Kweku said with a sad, resigned shrug. I must ask you to please move on, when you can. Seun nodded slowly. He got back on his bicycle and, without a word, rode out into the pouring rain. He didn't feel the cold water soaking his clothes. All he felt was the burning fire of injustice, an old, familiar heat he thought his billions had insulated him from forever. He was wrong. The second encounter was worse. It was a calculated act of public humiliation. A week had passed. Seun had altered his route slightly, now stopping across the street near a small park bench so as not to cause more trouble for Papa Kweku. They would exchange a wave and a smile from a distance. It was a small, sad compromise, but the connection remained. Lorraine, however, had not forgotten. She seemed to have developed a perverse obsession with the old watchman's quiet defiance. One evening, as a tour group of potential investors was being led through the lobby, she saw Papa Kweku give his customary wave to the man on the bicycle across the street. For Lorraine, this was an intolerable act of insubordination. It was a declaration that her authority was not absolute. She saw the wave not as a gesture of friendship, but as a personal insult. She stopped the tour group with a brilliant false smile. "Excuse me for just one moment, gentlemen. A small internal matter to attend to." She strode over to the security desk where Papa Kweku sat. He stood up respectfully as she approached. "Mr. Kweku," she began, her voice loud enough for the entire lobby to hear, including the investors and a half-dozen employees. "We seem to have had a misunderstanding. I believe I instructed you to cease your interactions with the local undesirables." Papa Kweku's face remained impassive, but a flicker of hurt crossed his eyes. "Madam," he was across the street. "I only waved." "You only waved," she repeated, mocking his accent with cruel precision. "Do you not understand the concept of brand integrity? Your job is to represent Sterling Cole. You are the face of our security. And that face is currently signaling to the entire world that we are a homeless shelter, a place for itinerant men to find a friendly face." She leaned in closer, her voice dropping to a venomous hiss, but still loud enough for those nearby to catch every word. This was her cruel dismissal, the line she had crafted for maximum impact. "You are paid to be a deterrent, not a welcome mat for human garbage. Is that clear?" Gasps, murmurs. The investors looked away, embarrassed. The employees stared at their shoes. The air in the opulent lobby turned thick with shame. Papa Kweku stood ramrod straight. For a long moment, he said nothing. He simply looked at her, and in his eyes, there was not fear or anger, but a profound and weary pity. It was this look, more than anything, that enraged Lorraine. "From now on," she declared, her voice ringing with absolute power, "you are to remain at this desk. You will not stand by the door. You will not look out the window. You will look at your monitors. If I see you so much as glance in that man's direction again, I will have you fired. I will personally see to it that your security license is reviewed, and I will ensure you never work in a building of this caliber in this city again." She held his gaze for another second, daring him to challenge her. He did not. He simply gave a single, slow, dignified nod. Satisfied, Lorraine turned back to the investors, her charming smile snapping back into place as if nothing had happened. "Now, as I was saying, our third quarter growth was simply unprecedented." Across the street, Seun had watched the entire exchange. He could not hear the words, but he could read the body language. He saw the way Lorraine gestured with contempt. He saw the way the crowd recoiled. He saw the way Papa Kweku stood, an unmovable pillar of grace in a hurricane of cruelty. When Papa Kweku slowly sat back down, refusing to look out the window, Seun understood. The line had been drawn. The war had been declared, and it was a war that Seun Adebayo, the silent billionaire, had every intention of winning. Despite the ban, despite the threats, Papa Kweku's kindness found a way. He could no longer greet Seun at the door or wave from the window. But every evening, just before Seun's usual arrival time, he would take his small dinner container and place it on the corner of his security desk that was just barely visible through the glass from a certain angle across the street. It was his signal. "I am here. I am thinking of you, my brother. Be safe on your journey home." Seun saw it, and every evening He would raise a hand in a small, subtle gesture of acknowledgement before riding on. It was a silent conversation, a testament to a bond that refused to be broken by one woman's venom. The river was being blocked, but it was finding a new path. Then came the day that changed everything. It was a Thursday in late October. For Seun, the day had been a catastrophe. A multi-billion-dollar merger he had been orchestrating for 6 months had collapsed at the 11th hour due to a competitor's underhanded tactics. It was a colossal failure, one that would cost his primary holding company nearly $1 billion. But it wasn't the money that wounded him, it was the betrayal. The deal had fallen apart because of a leak from someone inside his own trusted circle, someone he had mentored, someone whose family he supported. The sting of it was sharp and personal. It reaffirmed all his worst fears about the world he inhabited, a world of transactional relationships and smiling assassins. That evening, he didn't ride home. He rode to the park bench across from the Sterling Coal building and just sat, the bicycle leaning against the cold metal. He felt hollowed out, the vast emptiness of his life echoing with the day's treachery. He was a king on a lonely island of his own making, surrounded by a sea of sharks. His mother's face swam in his memory. What would she say? The river does not boast, but tonight he felt less like a river and more like a stagnant pond. He sat there for over an hour, long after the sun had set and the city lights had begun to glitter. He was so lost in his own misery that he didn't notice the figure approaching him until he was standing right in front of him. It was Papa Kweku. His shift had ended. He was holding a small, worn Tupperware container in his hands. He must have seen Seun sitting on the bench, a solitary slumped figure in the deepening twilight. He had broken Lorraine's rules and crossed the street. He did not ask what was wrong. He did not pry or offer platitudes. He simply stood before Seun, his face a mask of gentle concern. "My brother," he said softly, "you have not gone home." Seun looked up, his eyes weary. "No, Papa Kweku, not yet." Silence stretched between them, comfortable and profound. Papa Kweku looked at the man before him, and with the simple wisdom of his years, he understood that this was a wound that words could not heal. So he offered the only medicine he had. He sat down on the bench next to Seun. The movement was slow, deliberate. He placed the Tupperware container on his lap and clicked open the 2 plastic tabs. The smell came first. It was a glorious, fragrant cloud of spices, of tomato, of ginger and thyme and Scotch bonnet pepper. It was the smell of home, the smell of care, the smell of love made edible. It cut through the cold, sterile air of the city and went straight to Seun's soul. He looked down. Inside the container was a perfect mound of glistening orange-red jollof rice, studded with peas and carrots. Nestled beside it were 3 pieces of sweet, caramelized fried plantain, their edges dark and crispy. Steam rose from it in a gentle, welcoming plume. This was Papa Kweku's dinner, his one meal for his long shift. The scene unfolded in extreme slow motion, burned into Seun's memory for all time. Papa Kweku took the single plastic fork that was tucked into the side of the container. He paused, his eyes carefully measuring the contents. He was not just looking at food, he was calculating a division of his sustenance, his energy for the night. He slid the fork down the exact center of the mound of rice. The division was perfect, a straight, clean line. He gently pushed 1/2 of the rice to one side of the container. He then looked at the 3 pieces of plantain. He picked up one, hesitated, and placed it with the half mound of rice. Then he picked up the second piece of plantain, and after a moment's thought, he nudged it over as well. He left himself with half the rice and a single, lonely piece of plantain. He held the container out to Seun. "You have not eaten," he said. It was not a question. It was a statement of fact. "It is not much, but my wife, she puts her heart in it. It will make you strong." Seun stared at the container. He saw the rice. He saw the plantain. But he also saw the sacrifice. This old man, who earned in a year what Seun made in a single second of stock market fluctuation, was offering him half of his entire world without a moment's hesitation. He was offering it to a man he believed to be a simple laborer, a man who could offer him nothing in return. It was an act of pure, uncalculated grace. A lump formed in Seun's throat. It felt as big as a mountain. His eyes, the eyes that had stared down the most ruthless corporate raiders in the world, began to burn. Papa Kweku, I can't, he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. That's your dinner. Papa Kweku pushed the container gently into Seun's hands. His fingers were warm. When you see a brother who is hungry, you share your bread, he said, his voice soft but firm. It was the simple, unshakable logic of a good man. Today, you are hungry, so we share. Eat. Seun's hands trembled as he took the plastic fork. He lifted a small amount of the jollof to his lips. The rice was perfectly cooked, each grain separate and infused with flavor. The tomato base was rich and deep, with a gentle, humming heat from the pepper that warmed him from the inside out. It tasted of patience. It tasted of tradition. Then he ate a piece of the plantain. It was sweet and soft, a perfect counterpoint to the savory spice of the rice. He ate in silence, each bite a revelation. It was better than any $500 tasting menu at a Michelin-starred restaurant. It was the most delicious, most meaningful meal of his entire life because it wasn't made with expensive ingredients. It was made with love, and it was given with dignity. When he was finished, he looked at Papa Kweku, and he could no longer hold it back. The tears that had been burning behind his eyes for hours, for years, finally fell. They streamed down his face, hot and silent. The billionaire, the ghost, the king on the lonely island, wept on a park bench in the dark, his heart broken, open not by betrayal, but by a simple, profound act of kindness. Papa Kweku did not say a word. He simply placed a comforting hand on Seun's shoulder and sat with him in the quiet darkness, a watchman guarding not a building of glass and steel, but the fragile, shattered heart of a fellow human being. This became their new ritual. A few nights a week, Seun would find Papa Kweku waiting for him on the bench after his shift, the Tupperware container a promise between them. They would sit and share the meal, half for each of them. They spoke of their childhoods, of their mothers, of their hopes for their children. In the quiet intimacy of those shared meals, Seun Adebayo found the connection he had been searching for his entire life. He was no longer a billionaire. He was just Seun, a man sharing rice with his friend Kweku. And it was more than enough. During this time, Seun had not been idle. The failed merger had opened a new opportunity. Sterling Coal, the competitor who had sabotaged his deal, had overextended itself. They were vulnerable. Through a series of shell corporations and third-party firms, Seun began to quietly acquire their debt and buy up their floating stock. He moved with the silent, relentless patience his mother had taught him. He was the river, and Sterling Coal was the stone. They never even saw him coming. 4 months after that first shared meal on the park bench, the final move was made. Seun's holding company, operating under a different name, launched a surprise takeover bid. Sterling Coal's board, caught in a precarious financial position, had no choice but to accept. The deal was worth $4.2 billion. The day of the final signing was a grand affair. The main boardroom on the 40th floor of the Sterling Coal building was filled with nervous energy. The entire executive team was present, including a preening, triumphant Lorraine Pierce. She believed this acquisition was a validation of her aggressive tactics, a move that would surely lead to her promotion. She had worn her most expensive suit, a pristine white number from Givenchy, an angelic color for a diabolical ambition. She had no idea who the principal owner of the acquiring firm was. The deal had been handled through lawyers and CEOs. The man himself remained a mystery, a reclusive billionaire known only by his surname, Adebayo. When Seun walked into the room, Lorraine didn't even notice him at first. She was too busy schmoozing with the lawyers. But a hush fell over the room. Seun was not dressed in his cycling clothes. He wore a bespoke charcoal gray suit from Tom Ford that fit him like a second skin. On his wrist was a Patek Philippe Grand Complications watch, a subtle masterpiece of engineering worth more than Lorraine's car. He exuded an aura of quiet, unassailable power. He was no longer the ghost. He was the river at flood stage. It was then that he looked at Lorraine, and she finally saw him. The flash forward became the present, the recognition, the shock, the mass shattering. Her world tilted on its axis and then collapsed into a black hole of horror. Seun took his seat at the head of the table. He nodded to the lawyers. The documents were pushed in front of him. He picked up the Mont Blanc pen, but before he signed, he held up a hand. Before we conclude, he said, his voice calm and measured, filling the silent room, I want to tell you a story. Every eye was on him. Lorraine looked like she might faint. It's a story about value, Seun continued, his gaze sweeping across the faces of the executives. You are all experts in financial value. You measure it in stock prices, in profit margins, in quarterly growth. But there is another kind of value, the kind you cannot quantify in a report. He paused, letting the words sink in. For the past year, a man has been riding a bicycle to this building. He is a man of no title, no impressive address. By the standards of the world, by the standards of many in this room, he is a nobody. He let his eyes rest on Lorraine. She visibly flinched. But every evening, another man, a night watchman named Papa Kweku, would greet this man on the bicycle with warmth and respect. He saw not a nobody. He saw a brother. He told them everything. He told them about the simple greetings. He told them about the day it rained and the cruel words spoken under the awning. He told them about the public humiliation in the lobby. And then he quoted Lorraine's exact words, his voice cold as steel. He was told he was a welcome mat for human garbage. A collective gasp went through the room. The other executives stared at Lorraine, their faces a mixture of shock and dawning comprehension. Her career was not just over, it was incinerated. Seun's voice softened then. The anger was gone, replaced by a deep, resonant emotion. But the story doesn't end there, because true character is not revealed in how you treat the powerful. It is revealed in how you treat the powerless. One evening, the man on the bicycle was having the worst day of his life. He felt broken, and Papa Kweku, who had been forbidden from even looking at him, crossed the street. He described the Tupperware container. He described the smell of the jollof rice. He described in slow, vivid detail the perfect division of the meal. This man, who earns a wage that most of you would consider a rounding error, gave half of his dinner to a man he thought was a stranger in need. He asked for nothing. He expected nothing. He simply gave. That single plate of rice and plantain was the greatest investment I have ever seen. It was a masterclass in true value. He looked toward the boardroom door. And that is why the first official act of this company under my ownership will be to create a new position, head of building operations and community, a position that will be filled by the man who understands the true foundation of any successful enterprise, human dignity. The door opened, and in walked Papa Kweku, looking bewildered, dressed in his simple security guard uniform. An assistant had fetched him from his post downstairs. Seun stood up and walked over to the old man. He placed a hand on his shoulder. Papa Kweku, he said, his voice thick with gratitude, the board would like to hear from you. He had given him the mic. Papa Kweku looked out at the sea of powerful, stunned faces. He looked at Seun, his friend, and he said the only thing that made sense to him. A man must be kind, he said, his voice simple and clear. There is no other way to live, Seun smiled, a genuine, brilliant smile. He walked back to the table, sat down, and with a firm, steady hand, he signed the check. The signature, Seun Adebayo, was a testament not to the power of billions, but to the enduring strength of a plate of shared rice. The aftermath was swift and efficient. Lorraine Pierce was not fired. That would have been too simple, a clean break. Instead, Seun reassigned her. She was made the assistant branch manager of a small, struggling office in rural North Dakota, a place where her Chanel blouses and Louboutin heels would be absurdly out of place. It was a quiet, professional exile, a long, cold lesson in humility. Papa Kweku was, as promised, promoted. He was given the corner office on the ground floor, the one with the best view of the plaza. He was given a salary that allowed him to pay for his daughter's college education in cash and buy his wife the house she had always dreamed of. He was now the manager of the entire building, in charge of all operations. His first act was to institute a new policy. Every employee, from the CEO to the janitorial staff, would be greeted with the same respect. He hired a new team, people who understood his philosophy. The entire culture of the building began to change, from one of cold ambition to one of quiet, genuine community. Months later, a humbled Lorraine was working her new job. Her life was a pale shadow of what it had been. One afternoon, on her lunch break, she was sitting alone in a cheap food court, picking at a sad-looking salad. She heard a familiar voice. "The afternoon air is sweet today, my sister." She looked up. It was Papa Kweku. Seun had flown him out to consult on a new building acquisition in the area. He stood before her, not with triumph or pity, but with the same gentle warmth he had always possessed. He was holding a small container. Lorraine burst into tears, great, heaving sobs of shame and regret. I'm so sorry," she choked out. "I'm so sorry for how I treated you." Papa Kweku sat down across from her. He opened his container. The smell of jollof rice filled the air. He took his fork, divided the meal in half, and pushed the container toward her. "When you see a sister who is hungry," he said softly, using the same words he had spoken to Seun, "you share your bread. Eat. It will make you strong." In that moment, receiving a grace she had never given and absolutely did not deserve, Lorraine finally understood the meaning of true wealth. The closing image is not of a boardroom or a bank statement. It is of Papa Kweku's new office. The scent of jollof rice and fried plantain hangs warmly in the air. He is ladling a generous portion from a large bowl onto a plate. Seated across the desk from him, his suit jacket off, his sleeves rolled up, is Seun Adebayo. He is smiling, a look of pure, uncomplicated peace on his face. The river does not boast, yet it shapes the stone. And kindness, the quietest force of all, had reshaped everything. Every tale has a lesson, and our channel never forgets. Thank you for joining us.